So, I'm originally from Sri Lanka, and so I grew up there, and I had seen Sri Lanka at the time was like a developing country. It is at the same time, but also going through a massive civil unrest, a conflict. So I had seen poverty, I had seen social isolation, but equally I had seen women getting beaten up day in, day out, and living in those abusive relationships because they didn't have any help. And then when I grew up, you see, 1 in 3 women statistically go through violence, and I was not immune to it, because when you travel in public transport, when you are in public places, even though you're safe at home, when you walk out of your door, you're no longer safe. So I had some of those experiences myself. And then when I came here, I saw the same thing happening again in a different way. And then I thought, no matter wherever we are in the world, women's experiences are the same. And then that's where when I always wanted to work with the women and girls, and then gradually got into it, and that's what motivated me to set up the charity. But then I think working and listening to the stories and looking at the experience, sometimes now what motivates me is the change that we are making, or what we believe that we are making, but equally the anger, I think that injustice that you see, and you want to do something more and more every day. So that's what sort of motivates me, I suppose. The trust was set up in 2009, and almost we are 12 years old. And throughout that period, I have come across women from many different backgrounds, from many different ethnic communities, many different social status, economic status, you name it. And their experience are different to each other. Yes, all of them, majority of them, I mean, they come to us because either they have gone through physical abuse or mental abuse or sexual abuse, but also increasing, we are seeing women gone through financial abuse. So the women's experience differ from person to person, but all of them tell those stories of oppression, about intimidation, about lack of help. And so those are the kind of stories that we hear time after, the themes that comes through all their stories. For example, through the lockdown, in total, because we now work with men and women, families, women and families, so providing domestic violence, honor-based violence support, but equally providing money and debt advice. So we've seen approximately 1,700 people in 2020 alone. Those are unique beneficiaries who came to our services. It is dramatically gone up, because the previous years we would have seen 850, 900. But in 2020, it has gone up so much, and we've seen that constantly even throughout the 2021. It was very unfortunate, but and then things happen which is beyond any one of our control, I suppose. So, and then small organizations or grassroots level organizations have to pick up the pieces sometimes to support these people. So I think we were one of the organizations that kept our charity open and continued to support the community throughout the pandemic. So it was a challenging one way, managing staff anxiety, managing the crowds coming through the door, the physical management of it, but equally, I think, yes, we work in the sector, but also we are also human beings having to, day in, day out, absorb this and support each other, support in looking after the well-being of the staff, the volunteers. They were all challenges. But then constantly, I think in the first couple of weeks, we had to put all services on hold and just respond to the immediate needs, such as delivering food, collecting food. And it's gradually we had to do the other services after a couple of weeks. So I think that was a challenge. But we kept ourselves open, and touch wood, we didn't have a major crisis, I would say. So there is a category of women who has no recourse to, which we call no recourse to public funding. That means these women come through to this country maybe on a spouse visa or as a dependent, and then when they come through that route, they're not illegal, they're legal citizens, they're allowed to work, allowed to do education and go through, but they're not eligible for to claim any form of benefits. That includes housing or out of work, such as going through universal credit and things like that. And then what happens if the relationship breaks down? Then these women have no choice. The only choice remaining to them is live in those abusive relationships or leave the relationship and become destitute, because they have no means to help themselves. So that is what and we see a majority of the time it affects women from ethnic minority communities, because they are the ones who come to this country either as a spouse or as a dependent to a family So that is a challenge for many women. And we saw a massive increase of those numbers during the lockdown, because when the domestic violence increased, these women had nowhere to seek help. And even the mainstream refuges wouldn't accept these women because they have no recourse to public funding. And basically women's lives were put at risk. And we saw, for example, before the pandemic, we had one emergency accommodation, and during the first 3 months, I had to go out and get 3 other houses to house these women who were in crisis. And that is on top of the women who had recourse to public funding, who we were trying to support to find suitable accommodation in the refuges and things. This is the problem, because I think there are some parts. When we talk about violence, when we talk about women, when we talk about gender, and I think ethnicity, all that. There are intersecting issues and challenges. I think until we understand that and find a solution that is person-centered, I think that is the approach we have to take. But until we take that approach, we wouldn't address some of those issues. And until we address those root causes that cause these problems, we are never going to prevent what is happening right now. Now, for me, I think growing up in my own country, I had a quite comfortable life, because I belong to a family that I had brothers, sisters who loved me, my parents, and we were protected within the homes. But Sri Lanka is a patriarchal society, like many societies, and then even in that place, the women are second-class citizens. And when you're growing, you listen to your father. When you grow up, you listen to your husband. And when you're old, you listen to your son. That's the only way it happens there. So once again, that was my life. That was my life till I grew up. I was under the protection of my father, and then thereafter I got married, and then my husband has to take care of me. That's what it's perceived that way. And so the woman is the property of a man. And that's how the patriarchal structures work. So I was not, again, immune to that. I had to go through that same journey. But I think saying that, I was in a better place, because my father gave me certain liberties that other women of my age didn't enjoy, such as a good education, allowing to go about and participate in, go for work and go into university, go for work. So he allowed me to do that. So I was in a better place, but yet I was not immune to those systems which were there, the structural systems which were at structural level. No one of us couldn't challenge that at the time. And then come the political violence, then came the conflict, and which exacerbated those problems. So my life was, I think, in somewhat comfortable, but saying that I was not beyond those challenges. So I had faced all those challenges, and I think that gave me the understanding what women go through, a sound understanding of what they go through. So when I came to UK, again, I came with my husband, so I didn't come on my own, which was, so I had some form of I would say, support mechanisms in place. And then when I came, then I had my daughter here. But then again, I seen the same struggles that women go through. And then comes also the divide between the ethnic. It's not just the sex, but also the ethnicity. All this playing to part. And yes, there have been times that I've been a victim of racial abuse. I have. But what I choose to do is not to be a victim. I choose to fight. Because it's not in me to be a victim and just shut up and put up with it. I choose to fight against it. And sometimes when we say fighting, it doesn't have to be street fighting at that aggression. I fight in my own way and every day. So because of that, I choose not to be a victim. I think that is what I'm trying to tell the women who come here. Under any circumstance, women or men for that matter, do not be a victim of the system. Because sometimes it's not the people who are bad, it is the systems that they are, and there's no getting away from anyone. Until you challenge those systems, you will always go through, and go back to the root causes and challenge the root cause. So, which is the patriarchal structures that exist within many of our societies. And this country is the same. You have those same systems in place. Yes, it's not as much as in other places, but yet they are embedded within these societies, which give power to the privileged. So, doing the work that we do through the Zinthiya Trust, we also run, since 2012, we used to run food banks. And then we saw women, for that matter, families coming to the food bank, and they were getting the basic needs such as food and sanitary, hygiene products. But nobody was looking at the aspect of a woman coming to the food bank who has no food, so she comes to get food. But nobody was looking at the aspect of her biology and looking at going back to the person-centered approach. Because if you have no money to pay for food, would you have money to pay for your sanitary products? So I think asking those questions, and then when I started the dialogue, then women disclosed that they didn't, and so we used to give free sanitary products. But also I had some women, I have seen some women like working, and there's one girl who told me like she was using toilet paper in between her periods. So that is where we started giving out, and working with schools, working with the community. But gradually the need increased, and then we looked into it. Like we had a survey a couple of years ago. I did a survey in 2019, I suppose, and we surveyed around 78 women who responded. Said at least 68% said that at some point in their life they had faced, they were unable to afford period products, and equally about 40% of the women said that they've never had that first talk when they got their periods. Equally, they have never had that talk with their daughters, so which means the problem is sort of multiplying. And that is where we set up sort of a project to provide education in schools and also providing free period products. But then again, giving free as a charity is not sustainable. So I was thinking what else, because I'm a person who tried to find a solution, but a sustainable solution. And then we came up with the idea of the Bare Earth. So now everyone can subscribe to a pack of, rather than going and buying it from the supermarket, they can subscribe. But the income we generate through that, we sort of give it free products to girls who can't afford, not only here, but in other parts of the world. Because, say for example, if you see some of these pictures of my projects that I'm working on, and they're living in absolute poverty. And when we talk about periods, we think about women, about girls, but it's not only girls, because an average woman goes through menstruation for about 40 years in her life, and out of which you're only 10 years in school. So what about the other 30 years of your life? And there are women in prison, women in nunneries. Yes, just because they've gone into a nunnery does not mean that they're getting away from their biological needs. Yeah. So I think challenging those women in refugee camps, they have absolutely nothing. And then again, it's also not about giving them just period products, but it's also educating them. Because who am I to go to some of those poor villages and tell what you're doing is wrong, because they use traditional methods. What you're doing is wrong. No, what you're doing is, no, I'm going to help you to do what you do, but do it better, to do it more systematically, hygienically, rather than just imposing Western values of what I believe is good for you, because that's not how it is. So that's how Bare Earth came into place. The Chapel Cafe, again, we've set up a couple of years ago. What is different about the Chapel Cafe is, one thing, it's based within a church, and makes it a community hub, so where groups can come in. It's just not people coming to have tea and coffee, but they come as a meeting point, and also building race relations. Without your own, without having to impose something, without their knowledge, they come, they meet other people, and they sort of break those barriers of working with each other together. But equally, the Chapel Cafe is, the people who are working there are volunteers and staff, they're all previous service users. So we give opportunity to young people, people with a disability, women fleeing violence, to learn new skills, access employment, and move beyond, either into further education or more sustainable employment. So that's how the Chapel Cafe works. So she inspires, again, like I said, when you see, I think I have a tendency, when I see a problem, to find a solution. But I always compare, if the situation here is, if people are going through the poverty and disparity here, what about the people who don't have much, what parts of the world? Yeah. So she inspires. What we do here is again about sustainability. I provide coaching and mentoring, because that's the skill that I have. The income that I generate, I plow into other parts of the world for women-led organizations. So building women's capacity those women-led organizations' capacity to do better work in their communities. So the advantage sort of multiplies, the impact multiplies. Because I'm a strong believer, if you teach a woman, you teach a community. Through She Inspires, what I do is I provide training and coaching to individuals, but also small charities who don't have the capacity to buy that services. And then the income or the profits we generate through that, then we plow into other parts of the world. Currently, I worked in Nepal and Sri Lanka, supporting women-led organizations. So that way, those organizations can become more successful and support the communities that they work in. Because I'm a strong believer, like if you support a woman, you build a community. So that's how She Inspires work. Then the magazine came into place again. I think if I took lockdown, I think if you look at Leicester, basically, if you think everybody was affected, but who were the most affected were women. Like women who are either working in small cottage industries, women-led small businesses like the nail bars, the cafes, the restaurants, the smaller ones, the women working like in hair and beauty, simple things, who are doing simple things like that. And they were the most affected. Now, so I created the magazine as a platform for them to advertise their services, but also give voice, create inspirational stories about other women who are doing good work in the community. So I think a part of the problem for many women is the lack of role models. But equally, if you take Leicester again, yes, there's lots of networking events, not a lot of opportunities for women, but you see those are for the women who can have the affordability, but also who are always able to do that, and it's the same old people but I think behind all my work, I think the foundation is to give the people or the women mainly who do not have that opportunity to get the opportunity. So that is what the magazine is all about. So the Enterprise Hub is based on number 10 Bishop Street. And the aim again is going back to provide opportunities for women to shared working, co-working spaces, have events, come for a cup of tea, have a safe place where they can come and engage in their work, but also engage in other activities, meet, network, and sort of prosper, I suppose. So that is where the Enterprise Hub is about. And then they will receive coaching, mentoring, free coaching and mentoring if they're there. If they're working from home, they can use a business address. This place has their addresses. So creating that space and giving those opportunities for women. So I think I've come to a stage, it's like you said, there's a lot going on, but I think for me it is about consolidating on all that and providing those support to the women who most need it, because if you take Leicester alone, there's an awful lot of women in the back streets of Leicester who are not visible, invisible women, and who continue to suffer, continue to be oppressed because they just don't have that opportunity. And unless one of us or someone give them that opportunity, they will always be in that situation. So giving them that little push to come forward and get on with their lives and live fulfilling lives. I think that is the dream.